North Carolina is taking some heat for its now notorious bathroom bill, mandating people use the bathroom corresponding to the sex assigned to them at birth. With about 700,000 transgenders in the United States and the backing of both the federal government and some major industries, voices against the bill are growing stronger. I-24 News New York correspondent Daniel Ziri filed this report.
For most people, it's an obvious choice. Going into the men's or women's bathroom never required decision-making. But the question has sparked a lively debate in the United States recently when North Carolina passed a law requiring people to use the restroom corresponding with their birth gender, a problem for some 700,000 Americans who are transgender. 31-year-old Hannah Simpson is one of those Americans. She was born male and finally transitioned to, in her words, her authentic self.
I knew exactly who I was back then. This was never for me a question that I wasn't female or that I wasn't undefined. Everybody's trans narrative and the way that they get to that point is different, but for me it was definitely, I knew who I was.
Hannah began her transition at the age of 28. She admits that for her, the journey has been a little easier than for others.
We still live in a world where being accepted by your family is sometimes the exception and not the expectation. And just that one thing alone is what sets your destiny as a transgender person.
Family acceptance is indeed a defining factor. According to the National Center for Transgender Equality, more than half of transgender people are rejected by their loved ones. 1/5 have experienced homelessness at some point in their lives, and a staggering 40% of transgender individuals have already attempted suicide.
Trans people, especially those of color, can walk out the door and not be sure if they're going to become a suicide statistic or a homicide statistic first. Because there are tremendous issues in our society where they can be subject to attack, to discrimination.
For a community already going through so much, Hannah says the bathroom debate is more than just a logistics issue. It's a question of identity.
Legislating peeing is legislating being, and this is the method by which they can raise fear about us, and this is the same thing that was being done a generation ago when the gay movement was coming out, and people painted gays as perverse, immoral, and predatory of our children. But now it's the idea that transgender women especially are perverse, immoral, are men wearing dresses, and are out to attack our women and children, and that couldn't be further from the truth.
Transgender issues have not always been on the agenda, but have started to become part of the mainstream conversation only a couple of years ago, around the time former athlete Caitlyn Jenner came out as a woman. Throughout the presidential race, many candidates have indeed raised the topic. As far as the bathroom laws are concerned, after the federal government expressed strong opposition to the North Carolina legislation, experts now say the issue could ultimately be decided by the Supreme Court itself.
And Daniel Ziri is now joining us from New York. Hi, Daniel. First of all, thank you for this beautiful story. And I want to ask you about your personal experience making this story.
You know, it was very interesting, Odette. It was a 30-minute or a 40-minute interview with Hannah that I had. And the sense that you get from speaking to her, from walking around with her and getting to know her, is really that she is very, very comfortable with who she is in her skin. And the struggle at this point is not about getting comfortable with yourself. It's about getting everyone else to align with how comfortable you are. And that starts with, you know, other people in the street, people referring to you as he instead of she. She said that happened to her earlier in the day when we met. Things like bureaucracy, changing your name, making sure, you know, buying women's clothes without, you know, having people look at you too much. So it's really more about society lining up. And I think that what she said in the report is very important. When you get your family's acceptance, which is something that is not always common in the transgender community, but when you get that family acceptance, everything else sort of opens from there. And if you don't get it, it leads to other things like homelessness, rejection from work, a lot of other things that just really have a toll on somebody's mental health.
Of course, yeah, you do have to go through the process of coming to terms, feeling feeling at home in your own skin, and then you only then you start this work with other people. And you've collected some statistics also about unemployment within the transgender community, and the numbers aren't good.
The numbers are really not good. These are people that have very hard time finding a job. The unemployment rate among the transgender community is twice as high as it is for the normal population or the mainstream population. And when you think about it being twice as high, don't forget that the transgender population only represents 0.something% of the general population. So this is a very high number. In addition to that, 90% of transgender people have experienced harassment or discrimination at work.
Yeah. Now, transgenders have, some would say that the best help they had to break into the mainstream was, of course, Caitlyn Jenner. How is she perceived within the transgender community? Is she a hero?
You know, there's mixed feelings actually about Caitlyn Jenner. I thought the same thing when I first interviewed Hannah, and she explained to me that there are very different perspectives. So on the one hand, yes, she brought a lot of exposure to the transgender community. She made it into something in the mainstream, and they're very thankful for that. But it's true that her case doesn't necessarily represent what most transgender people go through. Not everyone has the money to get these expensive surgeries and look the way she does, or not everybody has their family's acceptance. Once again, she had her family's acceptance. So all these things, she's perceived as very privileged and not always sort of a spokesperson for the community, but they're very happy that she's here and she's raising awareness about it.
Tying back just very quickly to the bathroom bill, North Carolina, we should say, is paying a price, as some major companies are coming out saying that they will not open offices in North Carolina. Do you think that bill will hold there for very long?
You know, I think that what is interesting is it is having an effect on North Carolina, but what is really something that we've rarely seen in the U.S. is the federal government really coming against a state and the legislation of a state, and there's a legal battle here. So this is really something that the federal government says is against the law, the federal laws, and North Carolina doesn't have this liberty of passing such a bill. But definitely this is a battle I think we're going to see more and more in the coming weeks.
Probably end in the Supreme Court. Daniel Zilli in New York, good morning to you and thank you.